I watch over her as she gently sleeps. The soft dreams flutter her eyelids, her quiet breathing, and the blessedness of kindly eyes that are shut tight and the parted lips soothe my anxious soul. She is travel weary and has found her son. How patiently she stayed awake all those years, watching over us in our heaving, worrisome sleep of childhood, watching our future become our past. Now that she sleeps in my battered armchair, I know that she dreams well. I'm watching over her. My turn has come round at last.
Come on now. Come on now. Come on. That's beautiful, 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 beautiful. Thank you so much, Ben Okri. In case you're just joining us, this is Abundance, a global Black poetry conversation and performance. And we've been having a poetry reading with the great Ben Okri. And now we're going to be in conversation with Ben Okri and some global poets. Abundance is a part of the Furious Flower Poetry Conference 2004. It's a historic once in a decade gathering of Black voices, Black talent, Black essences from all over the world. And it's happening right as we speak to you. Ben, I have so many questions. You know, I always have questions for you. I don't even know where to start, but I'll start with this one. And I'm gonna. Oh, I believe that that questions are open to the audience, and you're able to ask your questions. I believe so. We have Megan, our communications person, running around trying to make this thing work. Forgive me, alas, I'm a poet. I don't know how those things work, but I think you should be able to ask a question in the chat, and we will bring them to Ben. Okay, so Ben, I'm thinking about three things which I'm going to pull together, and then our global poet will start asking questions. When you said 1985, Ileife, you know, that struck a chord, right? And then yesterday, I was talking to a great African poet who you know very well, Niyi Oshundari, and I said, oh, we're going to be with Ben today, Ben Okri today. And he said, Ben, where has he been? We used to be together in a bedroom, you know? Um, and then also when you talked about homelessness, right? I wanted you to braid together those questions about beginnings, right? And in some ways, it might even be connected to poetry and then to novel, the artist beginnings, the artist many journeys, specifically in your own context, in your own life. We see you now as this incredibly accomplished person, but from the poems, from the things you say, there seems to have been echoes of very interesting beginnings, to put it mildly. Please talk to us about that.
Yes, to put it mildly, Benga. Yeah, beginnings. I don't know. It's very hard to know when the poetic sensibility begins in the spirit and then begins on paper. So if you're going to ask me about beginnings, I'm gonna have to borrow a phrase from Yeats and start to hint at the things that angered me or woke me into speech. There was a civil war. There was being born in the middle of Nigeria, going to England because dad went there to study, coming back on the eve of the civil war. As everyone knows, the civil war divided Nigeria, and it certainly divided my family because my mom is half Igbo, so we spent a lot of time hiding her. So I kind of grew up during that period aware of how people can be divided against themselves. I also grew up kind of like seeing a lot of people kind of like being killed. I saw people shot. I saw bodies in the river just near our house, bodies of young men who'd been shot and thrown in the river. And I was full of questions about how people can do things like that and why we do them. And then years later, our family fortunes kind of turned a little bit, and I found myself with my family, having lived in a very middle class milieu, living as it were on the edge of Lagos, in a kind of a ghetto, where I found myself living amongst the very poor. That completely changed my sensibility, completely changed my life, because I suddenly saw how people really lived in the country, people who are unseen. And I began writing about them. I began writing about the fact that people had no water, the fact that landlords could throw people out of houses without any warning, the fact that people had no food, that children walked on the edge of gutters, you know, tapeworms in children's bellies. I was just, you know, I just wrote about all of that. I wrote poems about them. I wrote essays. I wrote articles for the newspapers. Sometimes they were published, sometimes they were not. And I made an extraordinary discovery. I wrote so many poems. I must have written about 100 poems, just responding to what I'd seen. And also, it was a period in which I developed a profound interest in the spiritual matters. So poverty and spirituality kind of came together in my consciousness, and I kind of still allied in that way. History, poverty, myth, richness, war, hunger, possibilities, all kind of mixed up. And it's all autobiographical. But it's that period of writing about the poor in Nigeria, in the ghettos, writing about them for newspapers, writing poems about them. And then I wrote one story that kind of, they wouldn't publish it. And it grew and it grew and it grew and it became a novel. But before that, I had about 100 poems, which I read one day and found most of them unsatisfactory and burnt about 90 of them, kept only 10. I would say that was in many ways my true beginning. That selection, that knowing that 1/10 of what you've got is any good and the rest is rubbish. It's easy to write, harder to select. It's easy to pour yourself out on a page, harder to choose one line, one word. Yeah, so it's two things. It's first of all, it's poetry responding to the things of this world. I learned that really very early, and also that was a milieu of writing at the time, of Nigerian writing, of African writing. It was very much a writing. Writers were very much expected to be very socially conscious. Neo Shundari not only bears witness to that, but the body of his work is, in a sense, that same rich response as is the work of people like Odiofame and other poets of that generation. But for me, it was that just learning to respond to one's environment. Not an easy thing to do. It's very hard to see what's in front of you. It took me a long time to learn to see steadily one thing, not a whole range of things, not a whole mess of things, not stuff that's in your head, not stuff that's in your spirit, not your anger, not your rage, but just to see what is in front of you. And that's one of the things I learned then and taught myself, and has been my most rigorous personal teaching from that period, to see what's in front of you. Hardest thing in the world. The second hardest thing is to know what you think and what you feel. But writing itself is easy. Writing itself is not the difficult thing. It's the birth and the growth of the spirit, the discipline of the mind and the spirit and the heart. And then, of course, reading. One has to read everybody, not just our great writers, Shoyinka and Mechita, Chebe and Bessie Head. We have to read everybody. We have to read Yeats. We have to read Shakespeare. We have to read Okigbo. We have to read Whitman. We have to read everybody, because poetry is a thing of the spirit, and the spirit is a thing of humanity. It's a thing of this earth. And we're all here, and we've got to nourish this earth and nourish the human spirit on it at the same time.
Thank you so much, Ben. Alrighty, I'm going to open up I have more questions for you. I'm going to open it up to our global poet. I think you should be, you can use the raise your hand thingy. Can you guys see that? Is it working? I hope so. Forgive me, I'm just a poet. Alrighty, so you can raise your hands and then, I'll just summon you and then you will ask your questions, or you can just raise your hand physically too.
Just speak.
Alrighty. Kopano seems really excited. Do you have a question?
Thank you for reading my excitement through the screen. I was furiously looking for the raise hand appearing, but it's there. I know it is. Thank you so much, Bengas. Thank you so much. I was wondering about this. I mean, Benga, you mentioned it in the introduction, being recognized as a sir by the monarchy of Britain. And I'm sure you've gotten this question before, but yeah, how do you reconcile the implications of that in terms of coloniality, in terms of writing so extensively about Africa and the kind of skills that it experiences. And I hope that this is not coming across as a critique, not at all. I'm really interested in like how to the wrangling.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a very important question because they've kind of divided opinions about it here in England as well. And I don't know. I take the view. I have three views on this. I've paid huge amount of taxes into this country where I live. You know, I really have made my freaking contribution to this land. I really have. Not apart from the work, but the taxes I've paid being here is enormous. I work my bones off, and I make my contributions, and therefore I consider myself having the right to whatever, whatever goes with one's contribution as a citizen to this. You know, I've dual nationality. I'm here in Nigeria, but this is where I live. This is where I write. I have to deal with that. And then there's also the question of taking, what's taken from you, but you never take. And I'm like, so much has been taken from us. I'm going to take this. I did not see it as a colonial thing. I saw it as a thing of contribution to literature, as a contribution to my art, and a contribution to my times as a thinker. I don't think it affects one way or another in any way my spirit. It doesn't touch my spirit. It doesn't touch what I write about. It doesn't touch my anger, my criticism, my rage, my understanding, my love, my desire for transcendence. It doesn't touch any of that. It's just a case of a right to receive where you have made your contribution. That's how I saw it. Really.
Right. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to go to Kichi in a few minutes, but I'm sort of thinking of the famished road, and there's this wonderful scene where a character just breaks into the spiritual prayers, and I think one of them, if I remember correctly, was where he said, "May success not break your spirit," right? And I mean, you knew success at a very early age, the Booker Prize at 32, and you've continued. You've written your books. You've mentored an hunger like a beginner. I asked that because you said it has not touched my spirit. How so? How do you guard your spirit in such a terrifying and commodifying space?
Well, I think success is an illusion, to be honest with you. I think people get too hung up on it. And seek it too much and drive themselves after it. And I understand it's important to be appreciated. It's important to earn a living. But all of this it's got nothing to do with success. It's got to do with the quality of what you do and the quality of the way in which you serve in many different ways. One can be a poet and not necessarily earn one's living as a poet. One can earn one's living as a teacher. One can earn one's living as a doctor, as an engineer. One can do any number of things. Poetry is a thing unto itself. So is art, so is writing of all kinds. It is a thing unto itself. I've always treated success as a bit of an imposter. I look at people who are kind of like knocked out by it and, swell their heads and walk 10 feet tall because of it. And I'm like, good luck to you. I'm on the ground. My feet's right here on the floor. You can put any number of things, give me any number of things, and I'll just carry on living the way I lived before. I'll go on with my simplicity and my love, my rage, my courage, my questions, because finally it's the work that counts. Success comes and goes. It's a great deceiver, makes you think you're better than you are, makes you think you've learned a thing or two about the craft when you actually haven't. This art is so long and so terrifying, so difficult, that you're a damn fool to think that someone's giving you a prize, therefore you know something. You're just stupid if you think that. It is one of the most difficult arts in the world. It is more difficult than science. People don't get this. It is one of the most difficult things in the world. So if you're going to go thinking about success in terms of what you're doing, you're already lost before you've begun. It's about the contribution, it's about the discovery, and it's about the difficult journey, singing your song for the world and for your people and passing on, and that's it. The success should be the work, not what people say you've done or what you've accomplished. finally.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you. I see Kechi's hands, and I'm not sure if I see Rich's hands, but I'm going to assume I do. Kechi.
Yeah, so I can't even begin to quantify how much of a pleasure it is to be in your company, Sir Ben Okri. This is a bit surreal for me, but my question would be, I just sort of was thinking about you saying now that a huge part of your education as a writer was learning to look at the thing and look at it consistently enough to even begin to make language about it. And much of how you use language, I'm thinking of the famished road and every other thing, this sort of true line that runs through much of your literature. The voice that you use sort of arrives as lyric, right? Or tends to arrive as lyric. And I'm sort of curious about, voice in that sense, how it arrives for you. What sort of goes into that? Is this a matter of craft? Is this something that's sort of deposited in the consciousness of a writer? So it's just sort of speak to that in a sense. If there's more time, I'll also ask a question about mythology, but yeah, let's start there.
Is Kechi right?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. No, thank you. That's a very, very important question, and a very difficult question to begin to answer. Voice is a very, very peculiar thing. We think our voice is how we speak. I'm talking about, physically now. And we think our voice, therefore, when we write, is how we think in our heads, or how we sound in our heads. But actually, it's not true. And a very simple way to understand this is to see the way in which over a career, people marinate into their voices. The early stages, most of us write with fluency. We're gifted. I tend to say everyone is gifted. Everyone is gifted as a young writer. First 2-3 books, everyone is really, really gifted. Then something happens. And everyone goes, oh, those early books, the gift or the voice. Often the voice hasn't arrived yet. It's just early gift. And that gift is there even whether you're a gifted writer or not. The early gift just goes with the territory. It's like watching children paint. They paint with this freedom. They draw with this freedom. They draw with this fearlessness. And then around the age of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, something happens to that fearlessness. Well, what's happened? What's happened is art has happened. What's happened is the beginning, the real beginning has begun. And it begins with the breaking of that early voice, the breaking of that early fluency, the breaking of that early supposed giftedness. That's got to break. It has got to break. And you have to struggle. You have to go through a personal wilderness of some sort, and there assemble the beginnings of your voice. And the strange thing about this voice that we're talking about is it is both something that, as you said, Kechi, that you're born with. It's already there, deposited in your head. But it's also something you have to discover. It's also something you actually have to assemble. It's also something that you also have to then, as it were, embody. So it doesn't land on your shoulders like dew. It doesn't come into your soul like a blessing. It appears after your hands have been broken. And I'm only giving you what I've learned from my writing life. There was a point when I realized that I had to break my hands. I've used this phrase a lot, and people always flinch whenever I say it. I had to break my hands and reassemble the hands that I work with. I had to, because the old hand that I had was wonderful and youthful, but it was not my hand with which I grasp the things of this world, whatever it is that comes into my consciousness, because that's what a voice is. Whatever it is that comes into your consciousness Your voice, your spirit, when you take your hand to your pen and your pen to your paper, finds a way to enter into it, to go around it, to express it. It doesn't have to do it like Shakespeare did, doesn't have to do it like Yeats did or like Schoenker did. It does it the way that only you can do it. And it can be as simple or as complex, as rich or as lean as your soul is when you have reassembled your hand and reassembled your sensibility. So I say it's a thing of discovery, a thing of work, a thing of suffering. And then one day it's there. It's not fake. A voice is never fake. A genuine voice is not fake. It's not gurning. It's not the twitch. It's not making faces. A genuine voice, you read someone's voice on the page and you meet them in person and the two somehow mysteriously fit. It's very strange. It's like, oh, yes, it's an instant recognition. The voice on the person's spirit, character, playfulness, craziness, foolishness. I'd love to have met Okigbo because there's something about his voice. I'm like, I'd love to have met this man when he began to discover his very unique tone. Sorry, it's a big question you asked, so I could go on for a long time.
Thank you so much. We're going to keep taking questions from our global poet, but we have this poem from the audience. It says, "I love the poem you wrote for your mother. My question with your poem is, what is the process of creating these amazing poems? And when do you know they are ready to be shared with the world?"
Wow, good question. I remember I was watching Mom sleeping. I did not write the poem when she was sleeping and I was watching her sleeping. It's important to state that. I just remember watching her sleeping and there was something, everything was in just that image of her with her wrapper. She was kind of sprawled back a little bit. She was tired. She was really knackered and she was gone. And I was just watching her and it just, all of my ages just kind of like passed through me. So it wasn't that moment, but it was something about that moment, the visual nature of that moment. And in this particular case, it was a visual thing, but with a huge emotional backdrop. Now I could have had a choice. I could have described her asleep, or I could have just done what for me is a harder thing, just painted the emotion. It was a long time afterwards before I wrote that poem. So sometimes you have the thing itself, you don't have the words. If I'm really honest with you, the poem comes when I start to hear lines, when it's left life, and it's already entered my spirit and alchemized into lines. Not one word, but a line. Sometimes a line will come and the line will be complete. Because I very much go by tone. I've said this many times before. For me, it's tone. For some people, for other people, it's image. For Joyce, for Yeats, it was image. I get the feeling with Wale, early Wale, it was very much ritual. For me, it's tone. There's a kind of an inner beat. And all the poem is there, and I have to hear that beat. And if I get one tiny bit of that beat, I can recreate everything else that I'm trying to say from that little beat. I tend to write poems. I tend to write my poems. It tend to come to me as a burst of feeling, as a rush of words, a rush of. It tends to be quite complete inside me in some way, like a storm swelling inside me, which I have to be very careful about when I choose to let this storm come into the world. If I do it too early, the poems are really sometimes not very successful. And it's very hard to recreate the fullness of that storm. So there's a matter of when, there's a timing. The timing of poetry is incredibly important. I once waited with a poem. I waited 22 years to write it. I didn't know how to write it for that period of time. It was about a ship arriving on a shore and a woman talking to me. What was that ship? I didn't know what that ship was. But when I came to write the poem, I knew what that ship was. It was one of the first ships that arrived on our shores, bringing change and destruction to our history. But so for me, it's about deep listening, and a lot of rewriting. Sometimes I have the poem and then I keep it and rewrite it for a long time. How does one know? I go by sound. I go by the beat and the sound. And I'm always trying to strive for simplicity, a new kind of simplicity in poetry. Too many poems. When I started writing poetry as a young man, the idea of poetry that was passed on to me was that it had to be overly rich, it had to be overly clever, it had to be full of all of these intricate dances. You had to be showing off. You had to be, and I wrote a lot of poems like that, but they were not me. They didn't feel like me. They didn't, they weren't truthful to my spirit. I'm not that kind of person, I'm sort of understated. I like saying, I like things that are more than they sound. You read it and you're like, oh, but you read it again, you're like, oh, you read it the third time, you're like, ah. I like things that hide, and I take it from reality. Reality hides. Reality is not brilliant. You look at a tree is just there. It's not brilliant. It's not showing off. It's just there. But you look at that tree long enough and everything is in there. Culture, history, love, time, suffering, it's all there. But it doesn't do that. It's just a tree. It's just there. I like poetry to approximate the richness and the deceptive simplicity of reality.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to go to Podiso, who will ask a question, and then Charisma. Podiso.
All right. Sir Ben, Okri, and Benga, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
My question is, as a young writer, how do you inch towards confidence to talk about your work? Speaking from maybe my point of view is that sometimes I'm just led by curiosity and obsession. I very much like to say I don't know where I'm going when I'm writing, but oftentimes when you arrive, you have to sit down and answer questions about what were you thinking about here. How did you always have this confidence and this ability to speak with authority to matters like climate change or writing? And how does one arrive at that? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Can you say your name again so I don't get it wrong? Your first name.
Podiso.
Podiso.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Important question. Confidence, like success, is a bit of an illusion. I hear so much talk about confidence and it gets on my nerves. What the hell is it? I like the idea. I like the thought that confidence begins with the word con. So I don't trust the emphasis on confidence. I trust the emphasis on truth. Let's put confidence to one side. Let's get rid of confidence. Put it to one side, and just let's talk about the truth of what one feels, which we can be responsible for. We can't be responsible for one's confidence. You can't. You step on a stage and you want to talk to people, and they're huge, they're big. The stage is vast, and you're tiny. Your voice is little, and you're a small person. Forget confidence. Confidence is not gonna. Confidence. I don't want people to feel my confidence. I want people to feel my truth. I want people to feel my passion. I want people to feel the intensity of my gaze, and my deep listening. I don't want people to feel my confidence or my craft or my art. I don't want people to go, oh, how artistic that was. Oh, wow, how. I don't want that. I want people to just be hit with the truth, the multi-layered, deceptive truth of what it is that one's truth one can take responsibility for. One can say, well, I might not be able to speak to all of these great fancy people, but damn it, I've looked at this thing, and this thing stinks. This thing is just not good for human beings. I'm not standing for it. And this is my way of singing about it. directly, indirectly, elusively. This is my way of doing it. This is all you're going to get. And that's all you need. I think confidence is in truth. The greatest confidence is in one's truth. And the confidence of one's work, I think you earn that. Again, truth, the wrestling with it. Sometimes you don't even have to wrestle with it. Sometimes a work is just given to you free. It's just given to you complete. It's a gift. You know, you rewrite it and you can't improve it. It's just been given to you. Maybe one or two words here, or a couple of lines here, you can change around. But sometimes it's just given to you just like that. You know, how are you supposed to be confident in that? Sometimes you're just confident in a gift. You just say, this has been given to me. It feels true, and I'm going to share this truth with you in the best way I can. But confidence comes to me from the long period of work. I wrestle over a piece. I look deeply into it. The work is the confidence. The love is the confidence. Really, even my uncertainty. I like my uncertainty. I know so many poets they're so certain and so, you know, that's great for them. I'm much more comfortable with being a little bit uncertain, because how can one see anything perfectly? How can one see anything? How can one see anything fully and truthfully? How can one grasp anything? There's always got to be a little bit of that uncertainty inside one's fire, inside one's passion.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to go to Charisma Prize, but we have a question for you from the audience. It says, what is the role of literature and orature in these times of heightened conservatism and rise of nationalism?
What is the role of literature and orature? Orature doesn't have to bother about its role. Orature is just the speech, the dreams, the song of the land, of the people in response to history. It kind of pretty much takes care of itself. You know, the people weave their truth from what they see, and they can do it right there in the midst of tyranny, right there in the midst of dictatorships. They can weave their songs. The tyrant can go about putting people in prison, imposing tough laws, and the people will just weave their song. They'll weave their song obliquely. They'll weave their song in parables. The parables might seem to have nothing to do with this dictator, but years later, when you look at it really deeply, you're like, that is the deepest criticism that's come from the land, that's come from the story and the song of the people. Orature we don't have to worry about orature's role. It'll take care of itself because it speaks in its own solitude and in its own richness and in its own fullness. As for literature, what we all get together and make in this modern form, I think it's the responsibility of us writers is really I think the first responsibility is to write well. I'd like to say the first responsibility is to reflect our times. What if you do it badly? What if you're reflecting the times and the language and the style and the storytelling is really bloody awful? Of what use is that? You know, it's of no use to anybody whatsoever. And the thing about writing well is it's got to do with the fact that what it is you're trying to say is carried much more fully across to people. That's all that writing well is. That all the levels of what you're trying to say, the rage, the anger, the outrage, all of that you've carried it over across to people in the fullest way and in the way that endures the longest, so that it goes on working beyond your generation and it goes on working for the generations to come. So it's always there as a voice, always there as an inspirer, always there as a strength, always there as a sharpener of the mind and a sharpener of the struggle. So that is always there. That's why the writing well is so important. So I'd say the first job of literature is that it's good. It has to be good literature. Otherwise, it's wasting our time and delivering messages, delivering truths to us really, really badly. And a truth badly freighted over confuses us. You know, it confuses us. We don't know what it's trying to tell us. You know, you take a case like Animal Farm by Orwell, you know, beautifully freighted little fable that's saying two or three things and maybe five things underneath. Now, if that were poorly and badly delivered, we wouldn't know what the hell he's talking about. Is it encouraging us towards community? Is it encouraging us towards solidarity? Is it encouraging towards solitude? What we don't know. So the writing well is crucial. The second thing is, of course, responding to the nerves, to the understories and to the overstories of our times. Sometimes the most overt things that are going on in our times are not the real things. You know, the most overt things, the big headline things might not be the real things affecting us. Sometimes there's real things affecting us that we really need to deal with are sort of underneath and haven't entirely surfaced it, but just working underneath. And it's our job to listen, to be kind of like deep listeners to the underneath. That's why sometimes artists and writers are called prophets. It's not because they saw the future, it's because they heard the present really deeply.
Thank you, Ben. Beautifully phrased. We're going to take two more questions, I believe, or maybe three, just to save time so that we're out of here on time. Charisma, are you ready for your question? Awesome.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, beautifully.
Hi, thank you so much, especially for the part where you said you had to break your own hands a bit for your voice, because as of late, I've been finding myself not struggling to write poetry, but I'm very much more like self-conscious, and I just have to keep breaking my hands to find that freedom. But I sort of have I have two questions. One of them, someone in the chat also has a similar one, so I feel like that connects. But the first one, I wrote it down too. So is it hard to write about the place or the thing when you are still present? Because earlier, I really like what you said about viewing things for what they are. For me, I'm from New Orleans, and I've been writing much more about gentrification and climate issues, especially post Hurricane Katrina and how that's affected me. And I find that because when I wrote all my other poems and my first collection, I was not in New Orleans when I wrote it. So for some reason, the physical distance was much more helpful for me. And living in New Orleans again, sometimes I find it hard to write about it, even though I assumed, oh, I could look out my window or I can just go to a specific place to really get the fullness of it, of what's in front of me. And my second question, I've been trying to write some fiction, and I feel like in my poetry, I have such a rich inner voice, and I'm thinking about image and sound and things with so much introspection. But I notice when I'm trying to write short stories, especially when the voice is in the stories in first person, it feels like all that goes away. I know I'm not the character, but I don't know. My mind does this weird thing. So my second question is, how do you approach fiction, if at all, differently than when you write poetry?
Well, okay.
I know that was a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Wonderful questions. Very crucial. First part. You know, poetry is not reportage, but sometimes it is. You know, it is easy to write. One, when time has gone past. Two, when distance has been accomplished. It is much easier because it's just settled. It's settled more in the spirit. There's perspective. But sometimes you don't have that. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes as a poet, you want to respond to what is happening right now, and you have to respond right now. Because if you don't respond right now, you will miss the feathers, the whir, the flash, the tactility, the shadow of the event. You'll miss it. You catch other things, but you will miss the smell of burnt flesh. They say it's one of the first things to go, apparently. If you've been in war, been in those smells, those unacceptable smells, apparently they're the first to go. How do you but to write inside an event, to write inside a trauma, to write inside of an impossible event that's unfolding, I always recommend simplifying one's voice. By that I mean to write as if one were not writing. This is a strange thing to say, but half the time the problem with writing is that we're conscious of writing, and so the consciousness of writing makes it difficult for us to write in the truest possible way because we're aware that we're writing and the writing is getting in the way of the writing. And I always say, sometimes you have to learn to write as if you're not writing. Just take that as I've given it to you and sit inside it. Sit inside it because it means being able to let go of your mind, let go of your identity, let go of how you see yourself. All of that's baggage. All of that's a weight that makes it difficult for you to do your psychic work. You know, if you write as if you're not writing, sometimes your pen just walks along that narrow, thin, golden line of truth. The second part of that question, moving from poetry to prose to storytelling, I think it's just a case of respecting the form, which we don't do enough of, because we have hierarchies in our minds about forms. We really do. We think poetry, oh, poetry, I'm writing a poem now, whoa. And I'm writing a short story, writing a novel, I'm writing a novel. You know, we've got all these hierarchies in our mind. Ditch the hierarchies. Ditch them, really. A short story is not really about the writer, finally. A short story is a service to the story, really. You tell a story about a murderer who went past your window, stopped and looked at you, and then the next morning came and knocked on your door. Really, you don't need a poetic prose for that. You just need to see this murderer, what he or she looked like, how you were feeling, and what it felt like when you opened that door. It's a service to truth, a service to the story. You know, really good poets hide in their stories. You know, you don't see the poet in their stories, and that's exactly how it should be. Why should you? You know, they're not writing poetry; they're writing stories. They're telling us a story. If they're really good poets, the poet's there, but the poet's hidden. It's there in the way in which they manipulate images, the way in which the inner core of the story distributes its meaning, kind of the intelligence that only poetry has, of working the mathematics of images behind the scenes. You know, so it's just really a matter of respecting the form and ditching hierarchies, and being in service to what it is that you're meant to be doing. If you're writing a novel and you bring the poet along, you're just making life difficult for yourself. For every sentence, you're like, every sentence got to be a poet. You're just killing yourself. Let the poet deal with poetry. When you're writing a novel, just be a novelist. And then you find that the poet was there anyway, because can you really ever get rid of the poet in you? I don't think so. The poet is there when you go for a walk. The poet is there when you fall asleep. The poet is there when you're eating pounded yam. The poet's always there. There's nothing you can do about it. So you don't have to worry about the poet in you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ben. Podiso, I keep seeing your hand up, but I think that's a glitch. Glitch, yes? Fantastic. All righty, last question. Thank you, Ben. You've been amazing. Last question, which I think it's a beautiful question. One of our audience members said, as a poet, have you reached any goals that you have set for yourself? Also, are there any aspirations? This person didn't say the Nobel Prize. You still hope to achieve for yourself and your readers. As a poet, have you reached any goals that you have set for yourself? Also, are there any aspirations you still hope to achieve for yourself and your readers?
Any goals I've set for myself? Yeah, there's so many things I want to do, so many things I still haven't done. Some very, very simple things. There's a place, there's still a place in there's still a place in the tone of writing that I'm trying to get to. I am still trying, I've been doing this for 40, 50 years now. And it gets harder, and at the same time it gets simpler. There's just there's something I'm trying to achieve on the surface of my work. It's yeah. With every book, I feel I'm getting closer to it. I have a new book coming out early next year called Madame Sosostris and the Festival for the Heartbroken. Again, one more stage. I'm just, yeah, for the things I'm trying to achieve, I've got nothing to do with the world. They've got to do with the art. There's certain kinds of poems, certain kind of sonnets I'm trying to write. It just takes a lot of time. There's certain stories. So all the things I really want to achieve, all my goals, they're all artistic goals. In many cases, they seem intangible. They might not seem like goals to anybody else, but they are to me, and they're almost impossible. And they keep me going. And as for the second question, the second part of the question was,
I mean, you sort of answered it together. You said, as a poet, have you reached any goals that you have set for yourself? You know,
there was a second part, or was it the first part?
Yeah, that was the first part.
And then the second part?
You've answered. Are there any aspirations you still hope to achieve for yourself and your readers? Yeah, you just told us magical sonnets.
Oh yeah. For my readers, I want to take them on extraordinary journeys in the simplest ways. I want them to read it. I want them to read a sentence that reads like water, but feels like the ocean. They're just impossible goals of art. Just stay with me. Stay with me on the journey, and let's keep sharing enchantments. That's what I really want to do. All the other worldly stuff is none of my business.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Ben. What a rich communion that was. Thank you so much.
It's been
thank
fun.
you, Global Poet. Thank you, our audience from all over the world. Thank you for your wonderful questions. We were live streaming this, and this is being recorded, and we're also going to share it on all of our channels so that it lives in time in that sort of perpetuity. Thank you so much. Later this afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the Global Poet are going to be reading poems. I'm so excited about that. It's going to be in multiple languages, in multiple translations, this intimate diasporas side by side. I'm so amazed. I'm so excited. I think it's going to be mind-blowing. So we're doing that at 1:30 p.m., close to just an hour from now. For now, we're going to go on a break. You can log into furiouspower.org to check the conference and just, be a part of us. Again, Ben Okri, thank you so much.
Oh, I want to thank you all so much for your wonderful presence and your questions and your spirit. Let's all keep on writing and dreaming and changing our world. And never been afraid. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Thank you,
yes,
friends.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a wonderful opening. Thank you. Later this afternoon, we will take you to the next level with performances and poems in multiple languages. Okay. I will see you all. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.